Hello again, Mini Painting Visionaries, and welcome back to the channel. This is my second video, and it is the first in my Zombicide Invader series. For this first video for Zombicide Invader, I'm going to be painting Dr. Vivian Rigby. Zombicide Invader tends to model a lot of their characters after classic sci-fi characters, so Vivian Rigby is modeled after Sigourney Weaver's character in the Aliens franchise, Lieutenant Ellen Ripley. Aliens is one of my favorite movies, so I'm pretty excited for this series in general, so let's get painting. We see here our unpainted mini for Vivian. To begin, I'm priming the mini with some thinned down brush-on primer from the Army Painter using a Citadel medium base brush. The goal with our primer is to get even coverage over the entire model so our base layer adheres properly. I'm starting the base coat by painting the leather parts of her jumpsuit with XV88. In the character art, the color is a bit darker, but we'll match that a bit closer with a wash later in the video. Although I started with a medium base brush, I switched to a medium layer brush for more accuracy, as some of these parts, including the trim around the armor padding and the areas adjoining the green in the jumpsuit, need a bit more precision. Initially, I missed some of the areas I intended to paint in this color, which is why you can see some darker brown painted in the armor, as the footage is a little out of order here. Using a medium layer brush, I'm applying Mornfang brown to all the leather padding on her knees, shins, shoulders, elbows, and forearms. Initially, the coloring on the two parts of the armor have a fair contrast between them, but they will blend a bit more naturally after the washes. For the green suit, I chose Wa Flesh as the base color and applied it in multiple thin coats, initially using a regiment brush by the Army Painter. You can see how watered down my paint was here, likely a bit too much, but after 2 coats, the color was quite consistent. In hindsight, I could have gone with a darker base color like Caliban Green to be a bit closer to the character art, but you'll see that after the wash was applied later in the video, it had a brighter look, which I feel contrasted the browns that occupy a lot of the details of this model. Switching to the leather straps, holster, and her boots, I've chosen a darker brown called Rhinox Hide. Although the difference in color for all the various leather is only slight, I've chosen to use 4 different shades of brown to give some variation. Using a gray primer is good for showing you which areas still need paint, particularly in the tricky areas and in the depths. Although pooling wash will cover some of these gray spots, do your best to cover all of the gray with your base coat as neatly as possible to ensure no areas are missed. The pouches on her left hip look to be a bit lighter than the straps, so I'm painting them with Steel Legion Drab, which I find has a slight greenish hue to it. There are a few metal bits on the model, which I am painting with Army Painter's gunmetal. These include the sidearm at her hip, as well as its barrel sticking out of the bottom of the holster. I'm also using this color on what I assume is some sort of grenade over her pouch, on her belt buckle, and for the ends of the gas canister fueling the flamethrower attached to her rifle. For her assault rifle, the art shows a brownish metal, so I mixed Rhinox hide with gunmetal in about a 1:2 ratio and applied it with a medium layer brush. In hindsight, I would have gone with a 1:1 ratio, as I felt the color of the gun should have been a bit darker. You'll see in the wash stage that the color of the gun was darkened a fair amount, but it still ends up a bit light in my opinion, and I'll be darkening the weapons down a bit more for the rest of this painting series. The flamethrower, gas line, and a decorative element on the rifle are gold, so I chose Retributor armor as the base color and applied it with a small layer brush. I'm using thinned down Vallejo model color black for the hair, but you can see it was watered down almost to a milky consistency, and it spread throughout the depths of her very curly hair, leaving the high points a bit lighter to make it easier to apply her brown highlights, which we'll add later in the video. Vivian's skin is pretty fair, so I chose Kislev Flesh as the base layer and applied it to her hands, face, and neck with several thin coats. For the gas canister attached to her weapon, I used Troll Slayer Orange as the base coat, applying it in a few thin layers. The first wash that I'm using is Nuln Oil. I'm applying it with a medium shade brush over all the areas of metal as well as the darker leather, including the straps, boots, and the reinforced areas of armor. The artwork shows black or very dark brown in the grooves of the armor, which is why I chose a black wash over brown paint. Next, I'm using Reichland Flesh Shade to provide depth to all areas of her skin. The shade provides a nice light red to orange hue in the recesses, helping the raised areas be more apparent. For the green on her jumpsuit, I've chosen to use Coelia Green Shade
which is a darker wash that will bring the color of the suit closer to the art. It's important to be careful while applying this wash over the areas that border with the light brown sections of the model, as lighter colors can be noticeably stained by darker washes like this one. I found that Coelia green shade made the jumpsuit color a bit richer and more saturated, and I was quite happy with the result. To darken the light brown areas of the jumpsuit, I'm using Agrax Earth Shade. This wash will also dull down the brighter XV88 and provided some nice shadow in the grooves between the armored padding and the lighter trim. After applying the wash to the jumpsuit, I felt it was much closer to the character artwork, and aesthetically, I found it looked a bit more durable. I also used Earthshade on the pouches to give more depth to their sculpt lines. Starting off the highlights, I'm using Gorthor Brown with a medium layer brush on Vivian's boots as well as all the leather straps. I painted the toes and heels of the boots as well as a number of their other details to make them more prominent. For the straps, I switched to a small layer brush, which I kept for almost all of the remaining highlights. Here I'm doing an edge highlight along the top and bottom ridges to make them stand out a bit more from the areas around them. I'm giving the holster and its side pouch the same treatment to make those details more apparent. I'm also painting a thin line across the top of each of the ridges in the armored padding. Gorthor Brown is a bit bright for this, and something like Doombull Brown might have been closer to the art, but I wanted the ridges to stand out more and elected for this brighter shade. Next, I'm highlighting the edges of the pouches with Steel Legion Drab and a small layer brush. This is the base color I used before the wash, so this will be a more subtle highlight at this stage. Now I'm using a lighter color, Talern Sand, to give a thinner, brighter highlight along the sides of the pouches with the same brush. To highlight the light brown details on the armor, I'm reusing the base color XV88 to touch up the outer edges as well as the raised areas for a very subtle highlight with a small layer brush. I also painted a line to highlight any border areas between the light brown and the green areas of the jumpsuit on both legs and on the front and back. On the shoulder armor, the mold of this mini lost some detail, so I tried to paint a false edge using this color. For the gas canister attached to the rifle, I brightened up the areas that would most catch and reflect overhead light using Troll Slayer Orange on the front and back. The next section to be highlighted is all of the green areas of the jumpsuit, and initially I'm reusing the base color of Wa Flesh. Again, I'm hitting any raised areas of the jumpsuit, as well as painting a vertical line along the border with the light brown areas. I'm also reapplying this color to the upper parts of the arms, as well as the chest, paying attention to the areas most likely to catch overhead light. I'm also brightening up the calves and the front and back of the legs to help build a bit of depth, although the change is subtle as it's a reapplication of the base color post-wash. To further highlight some of the green areas of the jumpsuit, I'm using Strachan Green. With this color, I'm reinforcing the lines that border with the brown parts of the suit, and also putting small highlight lines on the highest, most prominent areas. Next, I'm using Retributor armor to bring up the flamethrower, gas line, and the small decorative element on the rifle, sticking to the top half of these curved surfaces. To finish off the gold, I'm applying a final highlight with Auric Armor Gold, but only applying paint to the very top of these sections. I'm also hitting the highest areas of the bullets for her sidearm that are stored on her right thigh. Highlighting the skin, I'm reusing Kislev Flesh to brighten the areas on her hand that need a bit more detail, such as the fingers and top of the hands. For the face, I'm focusing on the forehead, nose, and cheekbones to make the features appear a bit sharper. Although it's barely visible, the belt buckle is bright red in the artwork, so I've used Mephiston Red to shape the area to match the image as closely as I could. For the rifle/flamethrower combo, I'm edge highlighting the design details with gunmetal. To be honest, I wasn't 100% happy with my accuracy for this edge highlight, but I learned a lot during the process. With this color, I'm also touching up the ends of the gas canister on the weapon. To make the sidearm more defined, I edge highlighted the areas that could be seen at the top of the holster and the tip that sticks out through the bottom. Although I didn't film it, I added metal elements to the zipper by her chest and also touched up the buckles on the boots. Here, I'm quickly painting the grip of the sidearm with Rhinox hide. In the artwork, we can see some brown highlights in her hair, so I'm painting some brown curls in random places around her head. For the base, I'm laying down a coat of Mournfang Brown, but as you can see, it is a thin layer and I'm not trying to get even coverage as the variation in color will look better at the next stage. I've chosen to cover the base with a Citadel texture paint called Martian Iron Earth. You can see I'm making the paint cover the entire base in quite a thick coat. My recommendation is to alter the thickness of this product to make it quite thin in some areas and thicker in others to make the surface look a little more Mars-like. I've never been to Mars to verify, but after the paint dried, it looked more like recently dried riverbed as opposed to the reddish gravel seen in pictures of the red planet. Here, I'm using a utility knife to scrape off any dried bits of the Martian iron earth that may have leaked over the edge of the base. This will create a nice smooth surface for our 2 coats of Mournfang Brown to finish the base. And so, here's the final product. I hope you enjoyed my second video, and the first in the Zombicide Invader series. Thanks for watching, everyone.